Welcome back. For the first episode of Season 2 of the LifeSpeak series, I'll be sitting down with Sue Kolesar, who is a health educator at Westfield High School. We're going to talk a little bit about substance abuse, mental health training, and just the program that she developed there called the Girl/Guy Thing, where it brings, it's like 40 plus students together for each event. And people open up about mental health issues, academic issues, or things that have been really tough to go through. So without further ado, we're going to head right on into this episode.
And watch the sun paint my window. The light comes through and bathes our lives in red. Let's go outside and watch the leaves fall above us. Soft wind on your skin turns your head.
The first topic I put down was, creating a better school community, because I know you've always been one to have sort of a sense of, what could we do better, especially here, because as some students are aware, and as you mentioned through the program Guy Thing, Girl Thing, you kind of invest yourself a lot into some of the students because you're just a teacher that cares. So I wanted to know what are some key issues that you see with students emotionally or mentally just in this atmosphere?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for saying that and recognizing, because I do care, and probably too much, as you alluded to, but I really do care. I think it's just important to get to know the students, to ask. So you ask, what do I see? Well, I see a lot and I hear a lot, and one of the things that I do to get that information is the first day of class, I ask students to tell me about some of the more superficial things in their life, their favorite TV shows, their favorite sports, hobbies, etc. And then on the back, I give them a blank slate on that paper to tell me what's going on in their life. And that's how I learn what's really going on in the school, beyond typical high school stuff like some bullying and academic stress. What I see in students is a ridiculous amount of anxiety, depression, family problems, academic stress beyond just grades.
Like pressure from family and the school?
Pressure from family, self-pressure.
Self-pressure, yeah, that's a huge thing.
I don't really hear too much. Students don't really share that a particular teacher or even teachers in general are putting too much stress on them.
Right.
But the level of homework. I don't think the expectations of the teachers, but the level of work.
Yeah, the level of work they get is what already works and what doesn't, in terms of, like the stuff we have here. I know there's preventive measures. I think I'm saying that right. Because we have some of the best guidance counselors around, and they're more on the preventive side, because there's really because if there is intervention here, it's very quick and students are taken care of. So, in sort of that sense of mental health, what works here and what doesn't.
One of the best things that I've seen in the past couple of years is ESS for students who really have a more intense need for emotional and mental support.
Yeah.
I've seen that program turn kids around. It's quite unbelievable and a huge credit to the fine work that they do. Of course, we also have the transition project for freshmen. I think that helps alleviate some stress and anxiety. And
I think anxiety definitely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They have a greater connection to the school.
Right.
And like you mentioned, the guidance counselors I think are critical. Even we need to enhance that connection so that kids realize that they're not just there for grades and college and course selection, but also just to listen to them and to give them some support. So I think we need to do more of that, and what the counselors are doing, like you said, is great. I really would like to see something that I heard about recently at Montclair Kimberly Academy from a colleague whose husband works there. I know it's a much smaller student body, but I think we can make it work. They assign one adult, one teacher, to a certain number of students as an initial point of contact, just a check-in teacher. Then, if the student needs more support, more help, then they go to their guidance counselor. And then they also have counselors that are just for college. So, and
like
academics.
Career academic.
Career academic counselors. But also they have counselors and student assistant counselor. We need that. We are desperate.
A student assistance counselor, but I think in Dr. Horn's podcast, he kind of explained, and he sat down with Miss Mazaris, and they kind of went over, that puts a lot of pressure. It can't just be a one-person job.
Right.
So, as much as I think it would be extremely important to have student assistance counselors, we can't just have one, so we would need a few.
Well, I've done a lot of research on it for a committee I served on, and I called around to several schools that have socioeconomic and academic standards and population much like Westfield. And most of those schools do have one and a half, meaning a part-time, or two.
Or two, yeah.
But every school I called, Clark, Cranford, Scotch Plains, etc.,
Really?
Summit, Milburn, all had at least one. And one is a start. One can run groups for kids dealing with divorce. One could run groups that are for students dealing with illness in the family.
Yeah. Yep.
One is a start. One is better than none, and one can be very powerful, because if you do things in group instead of individual, or do both,
exactly,
you can reach a lot of kids. And also a student assistant counselor, I think one of the things we need to do is use our kids as assets. Find those kids like the transition leaders and like the guy and girl thing facilitators who can be advocates for teens. Teens helping teens, I think we need to do more of that.
Absolutely. I agree. That's what I was heavily invested in when
exactly.
I was here.
And you were amazing.
Thank you.
And remain amazing.
Thank you very much. That was part of my general discussion stuff I had. I was going to say, because as far as I'm aware, my club back in 2016 was the only suicide prevention awareness club the schools had. And unfortunately, that kind of, as much as I love this town, that kind of says a lot.
Yes, it does.
Because while a lot of people, may want to do that or have
attempted,
yeah, it's more or less that, we're very, unfortunately, a hush-hush town. And I know for a fact, this isn't just speculation, that there are enough kids that have, gone right up to guidance because it was the last straw, and, said, I feel I feel suicidal, and they just get sent to the hospital, and that's kind of it. It's not like there was any preventive things going on. As much as we're supposed to go and talk to them, we don't have that connection with them, as you were saying before. So that's my biggest fear, is that it's going to grow, because as we've been watching the news, Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain,
and there's been a number of suicides in local school districts. We need to talk about suicide, and two of the best trainings I ever went to were through Caring Contact, and I believe everyone should take these courses. One was the ASSIST training, which stands for Applied Suicide Intervention skills training. Yeah. And then I took a course, that's a 16-hour course, and then I took Mental Health First Aid, which was an 8-hour course, and Mental Health First Aid for Youth, which was another 8-hour course. And then I had 32 hours of training in just empathetic listening, non-judgmental listening from Imagine. And all of those trainings should be human being trainings. I really feel we should need a license to be a human being, and that is a requirement, because suicide, depression, anxiety, mental health problems are all around us, even if we don't know it, because some of the people smiling the most. And some of the people with the biggest smile on their face and the best Snapchat and Instagram stories are the ones that are suffering the most.
Yes.
And I actually want to talk about that word suffering. I live with anxiety, and I use that term live instead of struggle or suffer from.
Yes.
And I'd like to see a change in the way we discuss these issues.
Absolutely.
Right? I have nothing to hide. I'm not ashamed. I'm living with anxiety, and I'm doing really well living with it. And I am open with my students, and I know that some of them have changed the way they talk about it. They say now, I live with.
Yep.
So just changing, like getting the conversation going, learning to be good listeners, teaching kids how to listen and teach others how to listen. I think we need more of that, because you're right, we can't just have one student assistant counselor. We need to change each and every one of us.
It needs to be a community effort.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, as much as like, again, I love this school, I love this town, but there's no, I'm hoping that now that we have the new mayor, we might be able to do something.
Well, I was happy to see when the Westfield Board of Ed came out with their strategic plan, their goals. One of them, I think number 3 specifically, has to do with improving the mental health and resilience and coping skills of our teenagers, and partnering with local community organizations,
Resources, yeah.
right? Such as Imagine and Care and Contact. And we've been doing that. Care and Contact has been into the guy and girl thing. We have their posters all around. Every single student in my class walks out of this class with a business card from Care and Contact. So we need to do that. And I'm glad that the board has that on their strategic goals list, and I'd like to see even more efforts, because it really is. Our kids will do better academically and move on from this school better and represent us better and be successful
That's actually,
if we get the mental health training.
That's a very good point I wanted to bring up also, is that if we deal with the issues that kids are going through if we deal with them right now, they will not be as intense going into college. They'll have resources to take care of themselves when they get there.
Exactly.
Because there are too many kids that I know that have taken a semester off, and
Right.
I don't even know if they're going back.
Exactly. I know so many as well that come home because of depression or anxiety or even suicide.
Yeah.
It's more than we think. We want kids to leave this building with a lot of knowledge, but we want them to leave with skills. Life's going to happen. People will also have mental health issues, but if they have the skills and we give them those skills, that to me is success. That is the school district's mission.
Yeah.
We are a part of this community. This school is not isolated from community.
Yep.
We all work together. We all want the best for students.
Yep.
And there's a lot in this
I think we should start
world.
in middle school.
I think we should start in elementary school.
Right.
The earlier the better, talking about resilience and listening and the importance of being a good friend.
Yes. That's important.
Kindness.
I think they try to teach that, but it doesn't come across the right way.
Right. Character education. I think we're doing some great things. I really
Absolutely.
do. And there's not, school can't be responsible for everything either. Family is obviously the most vital resource.
Family, yep. And then sometimes faith comes into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then you have, obviously, the other parts of, there's so many different things. That
Right,
we
the
have
physician needs to be doing mental health screenings as a regular part of a routine visit.
Yep.
Anxiety screenings.
Yep.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of layers to this, and a lot of the layers are stressed, and time is an issue. For instance, doctors, they have a waiting room full of patients, but if they could take that extra 3 minutes, or while a person's sitting half an hour in the waiting room, let them take a screening.
Yep.
It should be mandatory.
Yeah, I agree. I think, because I know that one of the things Westfield is known for is they have team, it functions as a team sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Departments function as a
Absolutely.
team, and you have programs like ESS and Bridge and
Mm-hmm.
Project 79, and they all sort of are you look at them as the team functionality
Right.
within the high school, and then you have the counselors who also meet as a team. It's just every part of the school, there's a team everywhere you go.
Right. That's
And
a good
so-
mentality.
Yeah, and I think that as much as some of those department meetings are about, curriculum, I think they need to be who should we be looking at in
Exactly.
terms of, who's struggling. And I know they have a program, but it's academic, the INRS
Right.
communications, but that's all academic.
Right.
I think.
I think there is discussion of some
sure.
mental health issues, but I think what you're saying is great. Hey, who should we keep an eye on? You
Yep.
worried about so-and-so, or, is he or she falling asleep in class or seem unfocused? Yeah, I think an alert system, a red flag system somehow.
Yeah,
It's a
so
great
it
idea.
just sends up the chain. That one
Yeah.
teacher sees it, another teacher sees it. They go to
The guidance
case
counselor.
manager too, because
Case
they're
manager.
such a great group of people over there.
Definitely. And I think we are doing that, but I think we need maybe a more formal process or
yes.
reminders or training.
Yeah.
But
Or a
I think
little
we
more
do
sped up.
try that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you look at the big picture.
Yeah.
You know, when you see one teacher is isolated in their views on a student or their concerns, and then another teacher is, but they're not communicating, well, we're missing the big picture.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a good point. So, is there any? I think we kind of went through. Is there anything that can be done better? The team approaches
school?
can be. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would personally like to see as many faculty and staff members trained in the mental health first aid course. I know Cranford High School just had all of their
Counseling
guidance
staff,
counselors
yeah.
take
and
that
health
course.
teachers. Yeah.
So, I mean, I would like to see that because I think sometimes you don't know what you don't know. I have so much to learn,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right? But unless you take that course, you really don't realize, in my opinion, having seen my before and after, the growth in my listening skills, you don't know what you don't know about listening and helping people and suicide until you take a course and you learn that. And even when you take the course, like I said, there's still so much to learn.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would like to see it mandatory for every counselor, preferably every teacher, nurses, child study team members, everyone. I think the more people who are trained, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
I would 100%, without question, one of the biggest things that I am passionate about is getting a student assistant counselor in this building. And I literally spoke with some very high up people in the district and voiced my concern for that. And I know, I understand there's space issues, there's budget issues,
Obviously.
but to me, that is
That's a
number
priority
one
that
priority.
that can definitely top a few other things that might be.
I agree. Because it really does, I mean, I know academics are the main goal of school, but I think we will have better academic success, more academic success if we can have a student assistant counselor.
Right. I think I've mentioned before that I think assist should be mandatory for counselors because even though I have gone through suicidal ideation and like self-aborted attempts, it's like you can't know until you know.
Right.
And there's so much about suicide that I learned in those 16 hours. And I happened to have been in a class with all women who were we had like a corrections officer. I mean, they come from everywhere.
All walks of life,
Yep.
right? All
Social workers,
professions.
yep.
That's so important.
And that's another thing I wanted to say is you can't learn enough, especially as a social worker, because there's endless amounts of new information that come in.
And every single life is different and
Yes.
set of circumstances.
So, yes, which is why I'm happy that I did not tell you, but I changed my major back to that, so.
And I am very happy to hear
Yes.
that. I mean, to me, there's
Brings
no
hope.
question. Yeah, there's no question what you should be doing with your life. It's what you're doing right now. And, I just want to point out that you just self-disclosed about suicidal ideation and aborted attempts. I mean, that in itself is life-saving because someone listening to this will realize that they can talk about it too. They're not alone. And what you just did and what you're doing is what we need. And you came and spoke at the guy and girl thing twice, and I know it made a difference for people
I hope
about
so.
what, the things that you've lived through and lived with. And so I think that's what we need to be doing. And, you mentioned you were in a class with a lot of girls, women. That's a problem right there, and you're breaking that mold. We need more men to speak about these issues. In fact, I would encourage every man listening or woman listening who cares about a man or a boy in her life to watch the documentary, The Mask You Live In.
Yes, absolutely. I've watched that as well. It's very important to watch.
Right. We need male role models. That's why at the Guy thing I ask alumni, like yourself, I ask teachers, male teachers to come and speak at the Guy thing. We need more of that. That's vital.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are just now realizing how important it is to have male, role models. I mean, you have Dwayne Johnson, who came out talking about anxiety, and a few
Michael Phelps, depression and anxiety.
Absolutely.
And alcohol problems.
Yes. So that's kind of where I wanted to transition to anyway, was the actual issues that you just things like substance abuse, because that is actually a topic that I'm doing with someone else later on in the series, but it's it happens to be a pretty big issue.
Yes.
And as much as I honestly, I can't say that I don't think sometimes people are just, living and doing, like, having those parties.
Right.
Sometimes that's how it is, but sometimes it's, these kids who are at their 6th or 7th drink.
Right.
And they're starting to go for the liquor. And just, I've seen some kids, and I try to reach out and be like, hey, like, it sounds like you're drinking your problems away.
Right. Self-medicating.
Yes. And so I saw you had a card down there. So.
Yeah, so, before you came in, I wanted to get my thoughts in line. So I wrote a card out, a little cue card here for myself. My main point with alcohol and marijuana. And, I think it's an escape that numbs emotions, but really does nothing to help you grow emotionally or intellectually. I feel like it's a Band-Aid. It impedes your ability to develop healthy, productive coping skills that do enable resilience and growth and problem solving. And I know from speaking with students, not from any research in a textbook, but from speaking with dozens of students, that it is addictive, that it is psychologically addictive, that they did use it as an escape. And so I
did myself.
Thank you for disclosing that. Yeah.
I mean, I brought it. I don't think I brought it up with the girl and guy thing, which is something else I want to talk about. But I have a lot of people know that, especially my friend group. I am lucky to have a friend group that I have. I mention them all the time.
Yes, friends. Yay, friends.
But they really are. I mean, they came out last year. I mean, a few of them were cover girls. Is that the right?
Okay.
Yeah.
The facilitators at the girl thing.
Yeah. And, it just, because some of them were like, because of what you were going through, I wanted to learn more. And that gives me hope that some other friends might do that for their friends.
Yeah. So you turn to marijuana or alcohol to deal with emotion.
Not alcohol. I think
pot.
Yeah, I did turn to marijuana definitely at one point. And at first it was like, oh well, yeah, I really didn't like feel any different. I just did it because it twisted me a little bit in a direction that for me felt like it was better.
Did it relax you?
No, it more or less just made me kind of a little happy,
Okay. Elevated your mood.
Elevated the mood, yeah.
Right.
I think that's the right word. As much as I was still anxious on it, especially paranoid, because it's illegal, so.
Right. You don't want to get in trouble, your reputation.
Absolutely.
If you were driving, I don't know if you ever had the
absolutely not.
situation to drive or be a passenger. I hear that from a lot of students, that they'll get in the car with a kid who's high. Mm-hmm. Not a good choice. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about life or death here, and it's not a good choice, and certainly not from a legal standpoint.
It impairs your judgment. It's been shown through research, but
yeah, I mean, even the director of NORML, National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, will say, do not drive under the influence of marijuana, especially an inexperienced driver, which a teen will be, and a younger person whose body's not fully developed and brain is not fully developed.
That's the issue, is a lot of kids are like, well, they're going to legalize it. I'm like, yeah, but you have to be a certain age because your brain still isn't developed. And
you're just decision-making in general, right? And life experience.
The frontal lobe is just not developed until like 25.
Yeah. And so that's why people say, oh, it's not dangerous, it'll be legal. But here's the thing, even if and when it is legal, it will never be legal for high school students. So I'd like to see high school students develop their sense of self, their coping strategies, and problem solving. And then when they're 21, if it's legal and they want to experiment, that's their choice. But I would say that as high school students and even younger, because we know middle school students are getting involved in marijuana and other things like vaping, I think you need to develop and grow both intellectually, physically, spiritually, mentally. And then when you have your coping skills, I wrote my coping skills down: music, my dog, exercise, TV, laughing, talking with my support network, self-talk and reflection, reminding myself all the times I had anxiety that was wasted energy and trying not to repeat it, and also volunteering. I feel like once teenagers have those coping skills, then, and if ever they want to try to experiment with drugs, if they're legal,
that's on them.
That's their choice.
Yep. I remember a few kids were talking about, substance abuse at the guy and girl thing, and the guy thing this year, because it was separate this year.
Yeah.
And I know that, that this one alumnus, is that the right word for
Alumni. Okay, well, whatever. Go with it. We're not judging.
He that like totally spoke to me. I mean, this kid had been through so much, and for him to continue to, go through all of it. I don't want to disclose names,
Right,
but I
right.
think we know who we're talking about.
Right.
I mean, losing a brother and going through all of that at the same time is just. I actually, for a lot of students here, I kind of fear that, they're going to go into college thinking like, oh, well, this is the same thing, and it's really not. You don't have time to be partying in college. As much as everyone says, that there's time for that, they're not your first year. Absolutely
The
not.
thing about college, first of all, suicide is the second leading cause of death for college students.
It's actually for that's what I wanted to bring up. I did a research project for my communications class, and the CDC labels it as second for ages 10 to 24.
So adolescence, right? Adolescence, even
And
early adolescence.
Earlier.
Yeah. So
It's just scary. 10-year-olds. I mean, I
Right,
met
we're
a
seeing
10-year-old
that.
in the
Even-
hospital.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So college, one of my, I think, best, most sound pieces of advice for my seniors going off to college, first week on campus, take a tour of the health services, especially psychological health
Yes.
services. Know where it is, know what it's like, know what services they have, know their hours. Just get your foot in the door so that
Absolutely.
if and when you need it, it's not this mystery black hole that you're walking into. Because if you have taken those steps before, they will be easier when and if you need them. Number two, if you are going to drink and do drugs, which I encourage them not to, don't do it for the first 3 months of college. Wait till you realize what the culture is, who you
Yeah,
can trust,
absolutely.
where you are, literally just the lay of the land, the academic expectations. I tell them also never play a drinking game they haven't seen played at least once while they were sober, because they have no idea what the potential amount of consumption is with some of these games if they've never seen it before.
Right.
And of course, I'm known for my trademark designated partier. Always have a designated partier with you, a 1-to-1 ratio, someone watching out for you, and then alternate if the other
Sure.
person wants to drink the next time. So those are some of the most important things I could say about going off to college and using substances. Also, there's called the red zone, which the leading time for sexual assaults to happen, the highest risk is the first semester of college.
Yep.
And a lot of that is tied to the drinking and the
Alcohol,
drug
yes.
use, which again, some kids may be doing because of mental health reasons, because they're using it to self-medicate as well as party.
Yep.
So if
seen
you're
that, yeah.
isolated, you feel alone, you're questioning if you're in the right place or you're taking the right courses or you're struggling academically, kids sometimes turn to the alcohol and drugs on college campus because of that. And then they also might not be getting enough sleep.
Right.
I hope you do a podcast solely on the topic of sleep, because I cannot
I think
overemphasize
that is
the
definitely
importance.
needed. Yes.
So tied to mental health.
Today, waking up was not my strong suit.
But you got here
I did,
on time.
I did. I do have some good days with sleep. But normally, I've had a few days where I don't go to sleep until 4 in the morning,
Right.
and I get up at like 2 o'clock. in the
And
afternoon.
let me guess, is it sometimes related to being on the internet?
Oh,
or
yes.
social media, right?
Definitely
That's another
being on there
topic.
at night. Yeah.
I have a card here about social media, and we call it
I
social.
think that's a good transition into
Yeah.
social media. So yeah, go.
I mean,
ahead.
we call it social media, but I think at the same time it can make people feel the most isolated, left out, and less
Oh,
than.
absolutely.
I
They
mean-
see their friends doing stuff,
Right.
not with them, and it's like, oh well. And I mean, when you're in bed alone at night with the lights off, it kind of you really can get depressed from it.
Right.
As much as people are like, oh well, that's not real depression. It's like, it's a depressed state.
Right, and it's
You get
over and
deflated.
over.
Yeah, and
right?
it happens all the time.
Feel not included, left out, not important, not needed, not
Absolutely,
wanted.
yes.
And then the filters, just the body image effects, the filters that kids are now using,
We
and
happen
adults.
to have some very inappropriate statements from people who are supposed to be role models about body image, and finally we have people like actual celebrities who people like who they love them, and they're coming out saying I forget his name. He's a baseball player, but he talked about his eating disorder. I mean, I think that needs to be a priority, especially in this school, because eating disorders are huge. It's not talked about.
Right. Well, the guy thing, we did have
Yes.
an alumni come in and speak about his battle with an eating disorder and how he's overcoming and living with it day by
That
day.
that was such an inspiration.
Wasn't that amazing?
No one expected that, I can guarantee.
No one. And that's the point. And I have had other students with male students with eating disorders.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm hoping that it got to a lot of people, which normally the event does. Which so is there anything else about social media you want to finish?
So, yeah, kind of what you hit on, it shows people's most exciting times and special times. But I have to say, I've noticed also an uptick in people posting about grief and loss, especially on holidays like Father's Day or Mother's Day. And while I do think that that is, for the most part, a positive outlet, I do think that it can't be the only outlet that people have. Because then they even think, oh, well, why aren't people liking this or giving me attention for this?
Yes.
And they can overdo it and overanalyze the feedback. Or it opens them up also to getting feedback from people who don't really, quote unquote, matter. And it might be the wrong kind of feedback.
I think that is I have personally, it wasn't grief, but there was definitely a time where I would post things on Snapchat. I got reported for it a few times because I was lucky to have some of the people that I did at the time be my friends.
Right.
It was just things like, time to forget about all this and, not doing my homework, and just things that
right. Weren't productive.
Yeah, and they were
helpful.
also it would appear scary to some other people.
Right.
And I mean, I got sent to the hospital for one of them, but it was more of a, over exaggeration of what had actually happened.
Right.
But just even those issues, like, people, as much as, we call ourselves, like, friends with each other, like with the other kids, I think the people that post that stuff, they need their friends there at that time more than they usually do. I mean, when people are posting stuff about loss and grief, it's like, hey, what do you need?
Right.
Do you need to go out and get food? You want to go drive and talk? Because for me, it's a huge. I love driving, and I think that's sometimes my best coping skill is to go for a drive and just kind of look at the scenery and
get out
listen
in
to the
nature is
music.
important.
Yes, getting
Just
out
the
in nature,
sunlight.
Yes. Yeah,
Well,
vitamin D. Yes.
The thing is with social media is first of all, someone hitting like or even giving you so much as the sad face emoji is not what you really need.
Nope.
I would like someone, like you said, to pick up a phone and say, hey, let's get together. I'm noticing you're really down on social media. But I want to teach kids not to communicate over social media, although it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'd like them to go to a parent or a friend or a counselor and say, hey, I'm hurting. I need some help, rather than just post what people don't really know. Is it serious? Is it not serious? Are they over exaggerating? Are they being over dramatic? I want to teach people to actually ask and speak and talk.
I think that's a good idea, but also I know that there are some really ignorant parents.
100%. And teachers.
Of course, you always have your fair share of those too. But I think the issue is, especially, unfortunately, in this town, a lot of the parents expect their kids to, be doing so. I mean, I have, some family members who just, will come over and will be like, oh, well, everything's great, right? Like, you guys are doing so well. I mean, I know you're going to school. It's like, yeah, but that's not all that's going on. I mean,
you're more than a student.
And that's just me. I know some kids who, if they tell their parents how they're feeling, they're just going to either be ignored or they're going to, they could get harassed by their parents for it.
Or minimized. That's a big thing. Students tell me all the time, I can't hear this all the time. My parents tell me, oh, it's just a breakup, or get over it, or there's people who have it worse than you. And they just don't know. That's why I said, and I'll keep going back to it, those courses that we've been mentioning, mental health first aid, they are vital, because you know what? Maybe you do think someone's problems are trivial.
Yep.
But to them, they're not. And so just literally listening and not judging.
And no advice giving.
No advice giving. Just reflecting what they're saying,
I think
mirroring.
That's the parents' biggest issue is advice giving.
Right.
And they don't always know how to handle it. So I know with my dad, he tried to give advice, and then he went, when he sat down with like my high focus counselors, they were like, you actually kind of don't know what's going on. And he's like, okay,
Right, because
why don't we
they'll cut
work
them
on it?
off.
And so, that when someone does that and is able to work on that with you, it kind of just, because I have I think I've mentioned, I have like a tough situation with my mom who, isn't really there. And so anytime we have a counseling session together, we've tried it, here, with my counselor. Yeah. It doesn't go over well because there are definitely other parents like her out there that just, like to deflect. When there's an issue, it's like, oh, well, Mom, I think you're not listening to me. I think you're trying to, push this back on me. Oh, well, but you do this and this.
Right.
And it's like, well, that defeats the entire purpose of what we're trying to do. And my biggest fear is that some kid's going to be told, that their problems aren't important to their parent. And it's happened already, I know for sure.
Of course.
And what are we supposed to do with those kids?
So here's what I would say. I think, first of all, thank you for sharing all that. What I would say to those kids is to find another adult.
Yeah.
You can never have one adult. You have to find the right adult. And the right adult might not be your parent. The right adult might be your guidance counselor. It might be your best friend's parent. It might be an aunt or uncle or teacher or coach.
Absolutely. I think the teacher emphasis, I think there's a huge emphasis, especially in Union County, because some of the teachers in Union County, I know a few Cranford teachers, I know a few Clark teachers, and I know a few teachers, from like just other schools in the area. And I know some, like, because I know I've met some students through many different walks of life, and some of them are like, yeah, I went to my teacher about this, and I've never felt so like supported. Here, that's what I love most about Project, is because you have a better like support system in terms of like, there's more people to go to that are like, they're very connected with each other, and if they notice things, they're going to talk to each other about it.
Right.
And so that was my biggest thing, is that I was always able to, up until all that stuff was really going on, I was able to talk about the little things, and even the little things sometimes help.
Right. And not only that, we have to also be fair. I am a parent, right? And it's hard for parents to look at things objectively. They're in this situation. We're also products of how we were raised and how our parents listened or didn't listen. So sometimes it's best not to talk to your parent about certain things, to get some of the support you need, especially if it involves family, from a non-involved, non-family member. And I'm also, we haven't mentioned this, but I'm also a huge advocate of professional counseling. I think kids sometimes have a bad rap, give it a bad rap, or there's stigma. I think there should be no stigma.
I think I was just going to bring up the stigma issue, is that I think Westfield needs to take the stigma-free pledge. I think the National Alliance on Mental Illness does such a good job with those pledges. I think Westfield should definitely be up there.
I will check that out. I didn't know there was such a thing, so I learned something today. I always learn when I talk to you. I'm going to check that out. I'm going to definitely incorporate that into my class next year when I talk to seniors about mental health.
Yeah, it's a huge. I enjoy seeing all these organizations take that pledge, because it's a way for. I think we need to, as much as the stigma is decreasing, we need to, just kind of even show kids that it's okay to just talk about that stuff.
Yeah, and you asked me, well, who should they go to if they have a parent that's not a good listener or is part of the problem? Can I give a plug to my favorite organization in the universe?
Yes.
Is that allowed?
They are probably my second favorite.
Okay.
Right
Next
after,
to who?
Prevention Lifeline.
Oh, okay.
Because they do the same thing.
Right.
But they're
work
just not
together.
local. Yeah.
So Caring Contact is a listening community run out of Westfield, and they run a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline. Every student, as I mentioned, gets a business card, and I also encourage them to put it in their contact list, whether they need it to pass it along. And their phone number is 1-800-273-8255, which I believe is the suicide hotline.
That's the suicide hotline.
Right, they field some of the calls for this National Suicide Hotline.
Yeah.
But also you can call 908-232-2880 from 7 a.m. to 11. And what I love is they're meeting people where they need to, in their way.
Where they need to be met at.
Where they need to be met, which for some kids is, or adults, is texting. So you could text the word heart to 741-741, and you can have a text conversation with a trained, empathetic, caring listener.
Yes, they are trained to listen.
Right.
That's a very huge thing for them.
And many of the operators from Care and Contact are college students who are studying social work. Exactly.
Social work, yes.
And they were in my training class, and they really do care. They're not just doing it for credit for something.
There's no money there.
Right.
It's a volunteer group.
Right. And they're passionate.
Yes. So I think that's pretty much wraps that up, because I know you have to now go.
Yes.
So thank you for listening to this episode of the LifeSpeak series. So that's about it. Thanks again to Julie Mazzola and Blue Moon Under for letting us use their music. See you next time.
Open my eyes and another day gone. Sit here and think until the break of dawn. Thoughts flowing freely through my head, but all that I could has already been said. Watching the birds fly above me is making me wonder if there's more to see. Lately I feel like I'm stuck underneath, and all that I want is to set myself free. Open my eyes and escape from reality. Sometimes the prize isn't all that it seems to be.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. That's fine. I can edit that out.
It's the heavens.